to the HeartStream Musings podcast, a podcast to help you on your journey of self-love. I'm your host, Lisa Mae Francisco, a self-love coach and inner child guide. In the podcast, we'll dive deep on how to heal your inner child wounds, break your relationship patterns, and liberate your truth so you can claim the relationships in life that you deserve. Thanks so much for listening. I'm super excited that you're here. Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm so excited for this episode because lately a lot of my girlfriends have been on this journey of freezing their eggs, and it made me reflect on my personal experience when I did it 2 years ago in 2021. And it's actually one of my favorite stories to share because it was such a magical time for me. It was a time where I was able to stay true to myself and how I cultivated self-love during this time and what transpired afterwards. And I think it's important to talk about our fertility journey and be transparent because you just never know who you can help. Whether you're thinking about freezing your eggs or have done it, everyone's story is different. And so in this episode, I'm going to explicitly share why I froze my eggs, where I was in my life when I decided to do it, my physical and emotional states while I was freezing my eggs, what dating was like for me during this time, raising my self-worth and staying true to myself around love, what that actually looked like. And like I mentioned, the magic that happened afterwards as a result of just loving on myself and staying true to what it is that I ultimately wanted. So let's get right to it. The year, like I mentioned, it was late winter of 2021, and I froze my eggs when I was 34. So I had never thought about freezing my eggs at all, but most of my girlfriends, again, at this time, they were around me, they were all freezing their eggs. And this got me thinking, should I freeze my eggs too? Should I drink the Kool-Aid? And I do want to acknowledge the fact that I am very lucky and privileged because during this time I had health insurance that covered majority of the costs. So, I know it's a very expensive procedure and it's not covered by all health insurance plans, and the costs are a huge barrier for women. So regardless of your situation, my belief is that if you want to freeze your eggs, you should have affordable access to this if you want, right? Depending on life planning, all of that stuff. So anyway, so all my friends were freezing their eggs at this time, and it just made me think about my situation and made me reflect, is this something that I should do for myself? I was 34, maybe I should look into this because I know that's a prime age to freeze your eggs. And I wasn't dating anyone at the time, but I did at that time have a desire to, have children. And the tone of being 34 was set when I had met my current partner in February 2020, right before COVID. And I had met him when I was 33. And it was actually the first time someone had ever invoked a desire within me to have children. And I didn't know that I wanted kids until I had been in his presence. For me, I just saw a future with him and it felt natural to want that with him. Granted, we only dated for a short time and this is right before COVID, but that sense of wanting a future and having children with him kind of just transcended all logic and knowing and obviously hormones. But it was the first time that I had this desire for children. And so it was actually just lodged into my heart as a whisper, as this gentle whisper that was just placed there. And this was the year, being 33, turning 34, where also my sister and her husband just had their first child. And so during this time, we were also celebrating his Father's Day too, his first Father's Day. And so I just remember that, my sister, she showed me this video that she created for her husband of all of the many firsts that they had as this new family with their newborn child. And I just remember feeling so sad about turning 34 because of where I thought I was in my life. I had just met someone, but that didn't work out. And, COVID was happening. So it was kind of like a year of just limited options. But I just remember thinking, oh, okay, that familiar feeling that I think all of us go through of I thought I would be at this, certain place in time at this year, at this age, but I'm not. And the disappointment that kind of just came thereafter. And it was hard turning 34 that year, wanting a life that was literally in your hands of, wanting to be with someone so much, but knowing that life and the universe had other plans for you. There's always just that period of disappointment and frustration. And it was disorienting because I had a glimpse of a life I wanted, but in the end, I was grasping for old memories of what could have been. And when you're in that state of just ruminating, of having something, but then literally trying to grasp for certain things that didn't exist anymore, it can be a very painful period. And so for me, I just felt this deep pain in my heart that just kind of just stretched to the bottom of my belly and just became this hollow ache that I walked around with. And, during this time for health wise, I was also going to acupuncture. And it's funny because my acupuncture, the place that I was going to actually specialize in fertility and helping women get pregnant or, helping them on their journey. But I was going to them for just, regular health maintenance. And basically, it's just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful natural way to aid your body in its healing process, whether you're in physical pain, emotional pain, all that stuff. Very, very much an advocate for that. So anyways, through my acupuncturist, because they had, specialized in fertility, they knew a lot of fertility clinics. So people that would go through IVF, people that wanted to freeze their eggs, it was something that was of their forte. And so through them, I had reached out to 2 different fertility clinics, and I decided to go with the one that was recommended by my acupuncturist. And a bonus that it was actually close to home because you have to go for so many different doctor appointments. You have to get your blood drawn a lot. And you just have to go through so many different checkups throughout the whole process when you're freezing your eggs. And so I knew this was something I wanted to do more so as an insurance policy in case I wanted to have children later on and use these eggs that were identified as being better quality at 34 versus when I'm older. And so, it's actually considered, and I hate this term, a geriatric pregnancy if you're above 35 because there's just high risk of complications. And so I told that freezing my eggs at this time was kind of like, oh, it's the last time you'll get high quality eggs. But anyway, I also didn't think of my emotions at this time either. I was just kind of going through the prep process of, okay, everybody does it. Everybody's, it's not new. People are freezing their eggs. There's this fertility clinic that is just so well versed, especially in their process of the intake form. It was just very much, this is what you do, XYZ, okay, sign here, blah, blah, blah. And so I was just following what I needed to do, which doctors I needed to connect with, scheduling appointments, seeing who I needed to see, calling my insurance company, all of that stuff. And so, but what was surprising was that it wasn't until I was in the doctor's office that I got in touch with my emotions. So that's when everything just kind of came up to the surface and started to bubble up. And this was before I was even injecting myself with hormones, but my emotions were just all over the place. And the motivation was viewing this as an insurance policy of just in case I need to use my eggs for later when I'm older. And so it actually got pretty real when I was asked if I wanted to also freeze an embryo. And that would require me to select sperm. And so that was just a big question of betting on a future partner, betting on being alone and having kids by myself as a single mom by choice, or never even having children. So those were just the options that I saw for myself. And I ended up only freezing my eggs. For me, it was just too much to go through the motions of selecting a sperm and creating ultimately an embryo, right? It was very strange. And I just said, I can only handle just freezing my own eggs. I can't even think about the emotions I'll go through when I have to select a sperm and ultimately potentially produce a child. And, so it finally came down to when I also got my medication from the doctors to inject myself with hormones and understand that I was just, at this point, producing as many eggs as possible for my egg retrieval. That's the whole point of freezing your eggs, is just, we only release one egg a month, but in order to make sure you have a viable chance of, good pregnancy, you have to get as many eggs as you can. It's kind of like, I don't know. I likened it to going Easter egg hunting. I was trying to make light of the situation and bring levity to it, because it was just a lot of hard questions that I had to face at the time of what my future could be, what it could not be, especially with the options that I'd listed out before of, is there going to be a future partner that I can have a child with? Or do I just go at it alone and be a single mom by choice? Or maybe I don't even have children. And that just kind of freaked me out, because it confronted me with the idea of the dreams that I had or that I thought I wanted for myself, and then realizing what was the reality and what was the situation. And so, I end up going to training to learn how to inject myself with these, with the medication and these hormones. And it seemed easy when the woman was teaching me how to do it. I just thought, oh, okay, mix this medication with this. All right, test it with that, inject myself with it on my abdomen. Got it, got it, got it. But when I actually had the needles and medication in front of me, I froze. I froze. I mean, I know some people, they have people that help them, but it was me injecting it into myself. And thank God my best friend was with me on the first day of my injections. She was my emotional support, and the timing was just great. We were getting ready to go out for dinner, and I was trying to not miss the timing that I needed to inject myself. And I even remember the woman who actually trained me. It was on a weekend. I had called her on her personal phone, and she literally stopped on the side of the curb to answer my phone call and FaceTime with me and help me with my first injection and kind of walk me through it. So God bless all those people, my angels that were just supporting me through this time. And so, I didn't have anyone doing the injections for me. And that act of doing it myself made me feel that much more alone. And I made this choice when I was single. So being alone felt even more palpable, and it was hard. The shots were not easy. And even though it's literally, like 2 weeks of your life, the days of actually injecting yourself just feel so long, especially when you have to go through that process again. And sometimes there's a lot of work you have to do ahead of time, where they put you on birth control to make sure they know when your period is. It's like this whole technical, very scientific process of wanting your body to be a certain way in order to produce a certain amount of results. It's like takes the intuition out of it, right? And so, the shots, they just were not easy. And it almost felt like an infliction of pain. And I got bruises on my belly, and that part just was the worst. And, during this time when I felt like that I was in physical pain because I was bloated and still haven't given myself shots. And, everyone's experience is different. Some people don't even experience any side effects or have any, emotional, hormonal kind of, roller coaster rides. But for me, I'm very sensitive with my body. I'm super, super, super sensitive. And so, I just felt a lot of discomfort physically. And, as I was starting to feel a lot of the physical pain, I even started to question, well, do I want kids? And I know the impetus was because my friends were all doing it and I had met someone before that made me have that desire. But I think it was just more of, you know, being with someone that elicited that and invoked that out of me. And I do have to preface this that in tandem of doing my egg freezing research, I did 2 solo YOLO trips to Northern California and also Southern California. I was visiting family in Southern California. I remember going out with my family in San Diego, and we were actually talking about dating. So it was just kind of weird how all of this kind of coalesced together of egg freezing research, being with family, talking about dating, wasn't dating anyone, and that question just came up. And I had dated, other people here and there during COVID, but as everyone knows, during that time, it was just really limited. You had to really be careful about who you saw. And, I was just around, I just wanted to make sure that I was safe, that other people were safe. And I just, was in San Diego with my cousins, and they were encouraging me to go on the dating apps and connect with other men. I was like, okay. I figured, well, it's been a dry spell. Why not? I'll do it. And, so as I'm doing my egg freezing stuff, I'm connecting with different guys on the app. It was like maybe before I did egg freezing. And then right when I got into egg freezing, that's when I started like matching and having these connections and, just connecting with all these different men. And in retrospect, I don't think I probably just should not have been dating, but I was parallel pathing it, meaning just in case someone worked out, right? Like, let me cast this wide net of options so I don't have limited options in my life. And so it was interesting because when I was dating during this time, the type of men that were showing up in my life were just amazing caliber of people. I kid you not. And I think it was because of the inner work that I had done. Also, I really stepping it up, wanting to know, loving myself. See, that's the key, loving myself in a way where I was treating myself as if I wanted a partner to treat me. So ultimately, what was being reflected back and mirrored to me and my experiences were just the caliber of people that I was attracting. And, I mentioned before that the guy I was dating, he ended up going back to Denmark because it was COVID. Went to go spend time with his family. And I'll share more on that story in the next episode. But I had lost hope because I was stuck in a time loop of wanting to be with someone and not being able to energetically move on. Everyone's lives was very much like Groundhog's Day. You had to find joy in simplicity. I mean, even looking out at trees when you weren't able to even go out. Just it got down to such the basics of life and being present and enjoying everything with no distractions. What was it like, in this collective unconscious like awakening of what life is and redefining meaning. And so, my experience of trying to move on from someone but not being able to be quite there because there weren't distractions of the normal day-to-days was very difficult. So it was literally like a time loop over and over again. And I mean, my cord cutting meditations with him just were not working because it was a very strong memory that was just imprinted in my heart. But, during that time, I was just working on myself, doing this self moratorium of not dating. And I was able to attract men that, they were showing up as emotionally available. They had high EQ. They had done the work on themselves. And I thought that was pretty interesting because actually all of them had been to therapy. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And they told me how they got into therapy and they had long-term relationships before. Um, and real talk, actually, I was working with a meditation teacher many, many years ago while I was living in New York. And he told me certain things to look out for when you're dating someone, right? If they're actually dateable. And it was one, what's their relationship like to their mom? Obviously, because otherwise they might be playing out the mother wound and that might be projected onto you. And the mother wound shows up in many different ways in our lives, whether you're if you identify as being a daughter or son or whatever. And two, have they been in a long-term relationship before? And what was that like for them? Do they talk bad about their exes? And three, when you share something about your day, how do they respond to it? Do they have emotional language that they use? Do they share their emotions and how they describe their life with you? And so those are actually three ways you can tell whether or not someone is emotionally available and whether they are dateable. So hope you wrote that down. If not, replay that part and then write it down. But anyways, so all the guys I was dating, they're in therapy. It was awesome. And we had a connection. We had an emotional language, we had a spiritual language, and we could connect on this inner growth and the aspirations that we wanted in our life. I think during that time, it just, COVID, it just made a lot of people introspective. And you had this basis of how is it going for you? Like, really, what's going on? And so, during this time, it's funny because I'm calling all of these really awesome, high caliber men, but then what happened was I started to freak the fuck out. And I had wanted to call in a serious relationship, but the universe is really testing me. Like, you sure you want this, girl? We'll give it to you, but let's see if you truly want it. And I remember going for a doctor's, checkup appointment and literally afterwards just crying in the exam room because the idea of being in a position where I would be able to have kids with someone just scared the shit out of me. I was magnetizing men that were, accountable. And I hate to admit it, but it's so simple. They were showing up. They, would tell me when they were late, so they were considerate. They admitted when they were wrong. I didn't have to twist their arm into making them see my point of view. They kind of just admitted. I guess it's just more of empathy, right? They're empathetic to understanding me and how I was feeling and, my discussions with them or anything that we went through. And they listened to me. They asked, I hear this a lot. A lot of my friends, they say, oh, I go out with people and they don't ask me questions about myself. But these men were asking me questions about myself. They were showing a genuine interest. And, I think we definitely need to raise the bar for the people we date, and all the things that I listed or just mentioned shouldn't even be an outlier of why someone is dateable. In fact, that should be normalized behavior for people we're romantically involved with. And so it's so interesting because we have this, the basis or criteria for having friendships, but then really when you're out there dating, and if you weren't romantically involved with this person, would you actually be their friend? Like, would you be a friend with someone that doesn't ask you about yourselves or shows no interest? Like, hell fucking no, you wouldn't. So why would you actually date them? Or why do you think that's hot to date them? And that is like a whole other episode about understanding how our familial dynamics and origins influence that and what we're attracted to and our set points. But there's obviously underlying reasons and it's complicated, but, just really being able to identify that it is a self-worth issue, right? What you think you deserve, you will actually want to go after and achieve. or you'll self-sabotage yourself. And so I had that moment where I could have self-sabotaged myself because of the fear of, oh my God, shit. Like any one of these guys I could eventually end up with, it might turn out great and they could, you know, be a serious partner. I could have a future with them. And, you know, the thing is, the more that you love yourself, the less likely you're going to accept treatment of anything less from other people and anything less than the life that you truly desire. And so, what was happening was just the fact that I was seeing men who merely reflected my internal world and self worth that I had raised during this self moratorium of not dating. And if I did attract someone that wasn't in alignment with me, I didn't entertain them. Just because you're raising your vibe doesn't mean that you're not going to attract people that aren't aligned with you. I think the real test is when you respond to that situation and either go into it going, all right, it's not for me. I'm not going to like dabble into that. I'm going to move on. I don't need to do it. I literally did that 10 years ago, all of that stuff, right? It's about learning your lessons and responding to that same experience in a different way. That's when you know you've moved on. And so for me, I learned to spot people who weren't on my vibe. And it just becomes a lot easier to spot the ones that aren't for you when you treat yourself good, right? You set the tone, you set the benchmark for how you want to be treated. And I don't ruminate trying to fit someone into what I want because I'm secure and trusting of what I deserve, right? And so that's the important part of staying true to yourself because it shows and not settling no matter what age you are, what other people think, what they tell you, and how they're living. So it's so important that you stay kind of like on your own timeline and stop comparing yourself. And I know it's hard. I know it's hard. That's why this inner work it's not easy, even though people just want this quick fix. But it takes a lot of time to change and redefine who you are, process and integrate the stuff that's happened to you, and embody your worth. And so, you know, that's me on my podium. Anyway, anyway. I do have to admit though that I actually did date someone, during COVID, and it was more of a relationship that never really went deep. And this was probably like summer 2020. So it was on and off during that first year of COVID. And it was superficial in a sense of stopping before it got to the depths of what it could be. And it was kind of ironic because this person just reminded me so much of my dad. Like we often talk about how we subconsciously project our parents onto the people that we're attracted to, but I actually kind of knew that he was like my dad. Like he had all the qualities that I loved about my dad, and we were very intellectually connected, felt very stimulated in that sense. And the interesting thing is that I knew within my body intuitively to my bones that he would be the last person I dated before I met my life partner. I knew that this was the ultimate test. Maybe that's why I walked through the fire. And so I was like, all right, I got to learn my ultimate fucking lesson. So all the good stuff of being, intellectually connected and just this fire and the zest for life and ambition and wanting to help, people. There was just this altruistic nature to him. It was all there. But on the flip side of that, the emotional unavailability was there too. But the other things that just kind of sustained the relationship and made me want to stay. And so although I intuitively know that if I ended up with him, it would be settling. So interesting, right? How we just ignore the feelings our body tells us. But literally lying to myself. It's hard though when you think you have limited options or don't have hope, or just not even hope, but faith, right? I think I definitely played into, I'm getting older, that whole narrative. But I guess subconsciously I had faith because I was, eh, I was still clinging on to the other Danish guy. So, anyways, fast forward, I'm dating all these people while I'm doing my egg freezing. They're amazing. But who ends up coming back into my life? It is the guy who is like my dad. And when I reflect and look back on that time, it was an experience where I got to really own my power and speak my truth, even if the other person did not feel the same. And so, I got to express my truth of when it didn't feel right with someone and turn down people that wasn't an aligned fit. So even though these men had fit the criteria, it just wasn't aligned. And I was able to express that. I didn't ghost. I shared my true feelings and I stood in my truth. I lived my truth. I was in internal alignment. And so, because of that, I started to build my self trust muscle more and more in dating, even though, you would think, well, I thought she just said that they were high caliber men. And why is she saying no? You know, Sometimes people can look good look on paper, but it's just not a right fit for you. Okay. So there's that. And I didn't think that, you know, about the timeline, what was going to happen. Um, what happens if I tell them I'm not interested? Does that mean that I'm not going to get any more prospects? Will the universe think that I'm not grateful for what's being sent to me? Am I just being picky? So all the self doubt started to creep in also about, am I making the right choice? Am I cutting off a person too soon before it can actually be anything? Can I actually trust myself in these decisions? Um, but I just trusted that there could never be any mistakes, just opportunities to learn. So I got all these opportunities to date and learn and be in my authenticity and just this embodied expression and just kind of own the fuck who I am. And so after spending time with that guy that reminded me of my dad, I just started to develop feelings for him again. And I shared that I wanted clarity on our situation. DTR, define the relationship. Um, and this person didn't know how to respond to me. And I felt really hurt. And it was in that moment I knew that I wanted to be with someone that could express how they felt, whether they felt the same or not, right? That could have that, I don't want to say controversial conversation, but just confrontational conversation, just honesty, transparency. And it was very hard. And I knew that even as friends, it couldn't work because, for me, when I'm with my friends, I want to emotionally connect to them. I didn't have it with him. So how could I think it could work romantically? And it just kind of shows you that, I was settling, that, I was willing to want to be involved with someone romantically who wasn't emotionally there for me. But that's not the same standard that I have for my friends. If anything, I think your partner should be a friend that you have amazing sex with, right? That's just like one way to look at it. But obviously, there's so much more. But, if you don't know where to go or start with how do you want to define what your ideal person is, just start with, you know, a list of all the traits that you would want in a friend and then add the physical stuff later. But, anyways, I told him that we could not have any type of relationship. And that was that. And I walked away and it just showed me that I didn't settle. And the interesting thing or the ironic thing was that the next day I was scheduled for my egg retrieval. And my family, they took me. And I remember just coming out of the procedure and staying in the patient area. And there was this woman next to me who had just finished. getting the procedure done, her egg retrieval procedure done. And her partner was on the phone. And, I could overhear them. It was their second time of doing this retrieval. And he just kept telling her how proud he was of her, how excited he was for this round, and that he loved her. And he couldn't wait to see her afterwards, and that he was just on the other side of the building. And the doctor told them how many eggs they got, and they were just both crying. She was crying in person, he was crying on the phone. And I remember sitting next to them with this curtain between us. And I was just very emotional at this time. And I just started bawling my eyes out because it was in that moment that I wanted that. And I wanted it so bad. And it made me realize that I didn't want to be a single mom by choice. But I had also accepted too that maybe it wasn't my fate to have children. So it was like the acknowledgement and acceptance of my internal truth that no, I don't want to be a single mom by choice, and props to people that do it. But also, I am actually okay with not having children if it's not meant for me. And if it's meant to, just focus on my life and be single and all this stuff. And, you know, I just, I wanted to be with someone who could emotionally express to me how they felt, was emotionally supportive, just all the things I fucking wanted in life. And I didn't want to settle for anything. And I held on to that vision. And it was really, really, anchored in that moment of hearing that other patient and her husband on the phone, and just the emotional response that I had within my body, and just holding on to that vision. And so a couple weeks, like maybe a month after I did the egg freezing, I go to Yosemite on a family vacation with my sister and her family, my little nephew. And while I'm there, the Danish guy who I was so in love with texts me and tells me he's coming to the States and would love to see me if I'm open to it. And this was during the time when they're about to open the borders and all of that stuff. And, I'll actually end this story there because I want to save my story with him for the next episode. But I just want to emphasize that I hope this story of, my experience with egg freezing allows you to build your faith muscle into whatever it is that you truly desire. Sometimes we might not have evidence that things we desire will come to fruition, but we have to dance in concert with the universe. We have to love ourselves enough to stay true to ourselves and honor the things that we want. And it's hard, but compromising yourself is a lot harder. That's when you start to lose parts of who you are, giving away your power because you're in fear of not getting what you want, fear of losing what you have, fear of not being where you are. And that's hell, right? That's hell. Of wanting to not be in the present, wanting to be somewhere else. And so to live authentically in internal alignment requires bravery and courage, and allows you to just kind of tap into your inner voice and just ignore the outside chatter of what you think your life should be and look like and how you should act. And so I really hope you question why you want the things you want, to ensure that if they are authentic to your being rather than a template that has been passed down by others. And that's something that I want to also emphasize is during my egg freezing, I had a wonderful, wonderful acupuncturist, and she always encouraged me to question the things that I wanted, question whether I wanted to have kids, even if I was doing this process, question if it's the right thing for me, and that you always have options whenever you think it's limited. And so I hope this personal story, my egg freezing journey, just serves you and can be an evidence that there are so many possibilities to how your life can actually unfold. And that if you honor yourself first, the rest will work itself out because your essence is rooted in that self love and self care. So I will end it there. But thank you so much for tuning in and listening to my story about my experience. Hope it serves you. If you want to work with me one-on-one, you can check out my website, lisamaycoaching.com. I have a page where I list all of my offerings. And the best way to stay connected is to subscribe to my newsletter, where I share weekly self-love tips, tools, and offerings on how to work with me. So thank you again. But before I sign off, here's my question for you today. What are you doing to fill your self-love cup and connect to the little you? Bye, everyone, and I'll catch you next time.